Well, welcome to the DatacenterHawk podcast. We are coming to you, not live, but recorded from our new podcast studio in our new offices.
That's right, Michael.
Very exciting.
We are here.
It has been
made it.
a long journey to get here, but we are here and we are really liking the new space. So I hope you enjoyed it. It looks about the same as the old podcast room, but you know.
But it's going to change,
I assure you it is much nicer.
So to our loyal podcast viewers, maybe not listeners because you wouldn't be able to see, but to the viewers, Rhett is saying that over time this will change. So stay tuned.
How many different locations do you think you've recorded?
Too many. Gee whiz, you know.
That's a good
lot.
podcast
trivia.
question.
Yeah, many. But this one will be permanent for a while, so we're excited.
That's right. Well, we're coming to you. This is Friday, a.k.a. Donut Day.
Friday Donut Day.
A.k.a. September 2025, a.k.a. conference season.
Yeah.
It has been a busy
we've been around
month and a half, 2 months.
As I bet many of the people listening have as well.
I would be
so you know what's
not
up.
be surprised. It's all the conferences.
That's right.
Yeah, so we've been out and about. We went Yada, DCAC, Data Cloud. You were a couple other places.
That's U.S. And then we've also been obviously in Europe, Latin America, Brazil, Africa. Thank you, Rhett, and Asia. I think our team was in Kuala Lumpur last week, so we've been around the world.
Been around the world.
The company. That's right.
That's right.
Gosh.
Corporately circling the globe.
I think these get a little off track on a Friday. We do little like what you just did right
loose,
there on a Friday that would come out, not necessarily on a Monday through Thursday. No. So you're getting the best of us right now.
All the facades of being buttoned up are dropped by Friday.
That's right.
Yeah, the team's been busy, and again, a lot of this is it's great to meet people in the space.
Yes,
that's really a big part of what we do is talking to people, trying to figure out what's going on in space. Like, what are the main themes? What are the evolving trends that are happening in space? And that informs a ton of what we put on our platform. Both the micro level, facility level data, as far as where's land being acquired, who's building, up to the macro trends.
Yeah,
what are the thematic elements driving the space?
Yes, and I've enjoyed. I think at some of the conferences I've been at, I've enjoyed getting to meet with people that have commented actually on our podcast, which has been really great. And it's always encouraging to hear. I feel like people when they're letting us know how our content has helped them along the way. So always appreciated. One of the other things that I picked up on was that there's people that are very loyal to our podcast that might have questions about, hey, what's our business? What do we do? And so if that
we
is
make zero money from the actual podcast.
That's right.
In case anyone was wondering.
That's right. Just
we hope you appreciate the ad-free experience.
That's right. But DatacenterHawk is a subscription-based platform. So businesses subscribe, pay subscription fees to our platform. And this is typically data center operators, investors, vendors, consultants, end users to get data on the data center commercial real estate market. And so this is all the way up from supply, demand, pricing, trends in the U.S., in Asia, in Latin America, in Europe. It's all there. So if that is you, your company, you've wondered, hey, what do these two incredible guys that talked about the data center space actually do for a living? No, this is our business. I started the business back in 2014, and we've been growing now for 11 years, and now the business it's incredible to see what our team has done, and it's really fun. But that is what we do. So I just want to make sure that if you're listening and you're curious, our website, surprisingly, datacenterHawk.com. That's right, datacenterHawk.com, and you can get information there. But we wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Back to the show.
And now back to the show.
That's right.
So one of the things I think that's become, we're always trying to figure out, again, like what is really driving demand? What is supply look like, et cetera, like as you described. But I think one of the things we're starting to see is some emerging themes when it comes to the demand side. And really like a handful of like very large groups.
Yes.
And that's, in contrast with, probably just 12, 18 months ago that it was, we all talk about the 4 or 5 big customers that really drive the majority of
typically the industry will call them hyperscalers. But
yes. That's changing.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about, as we've seen some of these groups emerge, it's starting to become more clear who these groups are and what type of demand they're driving. So talk a little bit about that, what you're seeing there.
And one of the big shifts for us at DatacenterHawk is how many more investors have gotten in the space over the last 2 to 3 years in the data center industry. That's been a big shift. And one of the reasons why is because of this demand growth at the top end of the scale of the spectrum. And so historically, I mean, Mike, you mentioned it, that was driven by 3 to 4 companies that had large growth. We would call them, hyperscale companies. So this is, if you think about it, typically this is like the AWS, the Microsofts, the Googles, the Metas, those type of companies that they really did 2 things. Just from a like a data center growth perspective, they would, geography wise, they would build data center campuses in rural areas to really capitalize on large power opportunities. This is a while ago, and then tax incentives that were available. And then, probably in 2012, 2014, 2015, they started leasing larger, this is probably 2015, 16, 17. They started leasing larger deployments closer to bigger cities to mature their cloud portfolio. And that was a consistent theme that you've seen. And these groups have continued to grow. They will continue to grow. They are in the middle of everything. They are really the foundation of this large growth. And they're only getting larger, as you can see. So that's kind of the foundational layer of the demand. A number of years ago, we started hearing about neo clouds, which we love to use. I think very unique terms to describe some of these users, but these neo cloud groups. So if you think of groups like CoreWeave, Lambda Labs, you could probably put Crusoe in there. These are groups that typically are AI or GPU cluster scale companies. So they're growing these, and typically they've been maturing in the last, I would say, 2 years, uniquely because historically they would lease leftover capacity, and then they realized, hey, there's a huge opportunity here. So then they started leasing larger facilities. Then they started doing build to suits that were offered by other data center developers. Now some of them are building their own data centers. So that's a big shift that we've seen, and that group has really changed the way that the market has operated, number one. Number two, they're competing for capacity that these hyperscale companies have typically had access to. Mm-hmm. So one significant change in our space over the last 3 or 4 years has been, really, if you were on that hyperscale level, you had your kind of pick of where these opportunities were. Now there's these other groups that are growing, and they're taking capacity as well. So it's become more competitive. Yeah. The power constraint has gotten worse, and the competitive number has grown. So because of that, it's created this really unique supply and demand imbalance at the top level. If that makes sense.
And then, to your point, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you understand that we've been supply constrained for many years now.
Yes.
And we knew that demand solely from those 4 to 5 kind of historical demand drivers we believed would continue, and it has.
Yep.
And on top of that, you've now got 3 to 4 new groups that are adding. This is not 10 to 20 megawatts of demand. It's significant gigawatts of demand when you look at them collectively. And so you can imagine, if you're just thinking about the headline supply and demand story, that it's getting extremely tight.
Yes.
And again, longtime listeners will understand what that means, but how does that drive kind of data center design, location, stuff like that?
Yeah, it pushes. What it's done is it's brought the demand growth to other areas traditionally that have not had data center development much more. It's brought those areas to become much more attractive. So, if you have power in an area that can be deployed in 2 to 3 years, now it depends much less on where that area is, mm-hmm. and much more on how quickly that power can be delivered. Now, there's challenges as you move to these areas because, there's not a ton of labor in some of these markets that are very rural, and there's challenges sometimes with fiber. There's other issues that come up, but if you can solve that power challenge, you're an area that is all of a sudden more attractive for certainly for data center development. So think again, if you have that hyperscale level, then you have the neo clouds, and then you also have the model builders. So if you think about OpenAI as probably one of the most public ones, but there's others too that are out there, building these models, and they're not necessarily like building the data centers themselves, but they need data centers to be built to house what they're doing. And this is the AI boom. I mean, this is really what's driving a lot of it, is housing their work, and we're seeing them be very active across the U.S. I mean, I would say the U.S. right now is where most of this is happening, and there's reasons why, and it's not. I think there's desires for this to happen in other places, but I think one, it's the maturity of these companies to get kind of their U.S. based story right, and then take it other places, and then two, it's can other international regions deploy capacity at the levels needed to make this happen.
Yeah, I think it's partially, well, it's probably majority. It's just harder to deploy large amounts of capacity outside of the U.S.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly some regions that can happen. And I think there's another layer of that, which can be some of the regulatory environment around both the power and some of the AI use cases that we've seen some legislation, overseas that's not as friendly.
Yeah.
And so, again, but to your point, just the maturity of the data center space in the U.S. just probably begets the growth here as well. Because there's so much other activity already here. It just makes the most sense. And a lot of these companies are based here.
And on that note too, it'll be fascinating to watch some of these bigger requirements that go into these secondary, tertiary, rural markets. How many more requirements will go there? Meaning go to a market that has received one of these larger ones. Because in my experience, what I found is that many of these groups will certainly be interested in the initial development, the initial growth. It is construction jobs. It is, what's happening in Abilene, Texas, the data center development that's happening there has changed that town. But I also would say there's a cost to that. And, a town like Abilene, at some point, do they say, hey, we've now gotten or received, 2 to 3 gigawatts of data center requirements. It's had, it's been great, but we think we're done for a while with data center growth, data center development. And so on the smaller communities, you're not talking about a 100 megawatt facility. 100 megawatts is still a lot of money, really big, a lot of power. We're talking about that times 30, in some of these places. And so just to understand how realistic it is to how big these smaller markets can get will be interesting to watch. So keep that on your radar.
Yeah. When I was in Austin, I guess that was last week, feels like a month ago.
Yeah, sure.
Austin's grown pretty significantly. I think it's gone from
the city as a whole.
The city, the market as we define it.
Yes.
It was 50
it is the home of the
Texas
Texas Longhorns, that's probably the worst part about it.
I'm sure why you bring that up, but
sorry, I went to Baylor.
Yeah, Baylor
Deal
guy.
with it.
Hey, Waco, a lot of data center interest there.
That's right. Sorry, go back to Austin.
But Austin's gone from 50, 60 megawatts to I think around 500 now in the last probably 2 years.
Yes.
And you saw that similar story in Portland where it kind of went from nothing to 300 to 400 megawatts very quickly, and then somewhat stalled out. So it's like if you can find some of these, I want to call it arbitrage, but there's pockets of there are places you can get power or you can generate it, and it's I wouldn't say easy, but companies or markets go very quickly from kind of zero to something, but then there's that next leap of going are we going to be a 5 gigawatt market in Abilene or wherever, El Paso?
Well, no,
and you got to get the grid and generation and transmission involved. It just becomes way more harder. So it's to your point, I think you would validate this. You'll probably see a lot of these distributed developments, but to your point, can they continue? Will those become multi-operator, multi kind of developer markets? Yeah,
that's the question and thing to watch. So if you're looking to buy land or go get, land in other places, you really just got to be thoughtful on, you want to be first or second, maybe second, but third, fourth, fifth, there's probably question marks around that in some of these places. So, and then, so we talked about hyperscalers, talked about neoclouds, talked about model builders. And then the fourth thing I wanted to bring up was the chip makers. Mm-hmm. So obviously these chips are what is fueling the growth for, AI development. And, the top chip makers, NVIDIA, and so there's others as well that are out there. But, these groups too are driving different data center demand as well. And so, and typically they might lease capacity in larger amounts today, which I'm sure they're doing. But I think one of the things to think about, as I kind of wrap these four up is, so think 5 years ago we had this hyperscale group. They were leading the way. They really had the options put in front of them about what they could do. And these other groups from a maturity perspective where they are now just didn't exist, and again, I know NVIDIA existed 5 years ago. I'm just saying to where they are today. Yeah. It's a very different world. And so now you've got these 3 other groups that are out there leasing capacity. They have needs, not just here in the U.S., but all over. And so it's really shifted the playing field for what the opportunities are from an investor perspective, what the opportunities are from a data center developer standpoint, where you can build data centers and where you can't build data centers. And for the most part, the industry feels like we're in this world for a while, and the question is going to be, how quickly can you find power and get power to a site? And that's why you're seeing a lot of these, behind the meter solutions being talked about. I think there's still question marks on a lot of them, but they're certainly being announced all the time. I just think it's important to understand and identify, and kind of for everyone to be aware of some of these shifts at the highest level from a demand perspective and how that's impacting the market.
Yeah. And I think, on the one hand, it's probably nice from an operator standpoint. If you're a developer, you probably had good relationships with the big hyperscalers. And now you've got to go build new relationships, but you've got to figure that out. Like, how does this company want to buy? What design are they looking for? Where do they want to be?
Yes.
And now you've got 15 to 20 companies. Again, this is probably a net good thing, but you've got to do some real work to figure out, like, can we service this company the way they want to meet their demand needs?
Yeah. And also, I mean, we've talked about this on previous podcasts, but the structuring of these deals is a really important thing to watch. How you finance them, they're so large, and so how do you get the financing to go do some of these gigantic deals? How do you structure them from an ownership perspective? How do you service them? Where does the equipment come from? How do you realistically deliver on the operating side of things? I mean, there are some impacts right now from like the power companies asking for data center developers and operators to pay more upfront. I think there's more scrutiny around the users wanting to see the PPAs, like the power agreements before they'll sign a lease. There's these things that are happening right now that are kind of, the end user community going to the providers and saying, "Hey, show me you can do this." Because if you don't show me you can do it, I'm not agreeing to do this with you. And so I think the groups that obviously can pay the money, can show them they can do this, and then have done it before, it's really valuable. It's really hard today to be, and it's one of the reasons that some of the people that have come into this space in the last 2 years are already out, because they tried to come in with kind of the mindset of like, oh, we can just jump into this space and participate, and it's not like that. I mean, there are opportunities to jump in and participate, but you've really got to be thoughtful around how you do it, who you partner with, the groups you choose, what you choose to say, when you choose to bring your site to the market and not, when you choose to say we have 4 gigawatts that we have available or not. There's just some things to say, things not to say that are going to get you credibility or hurt your credibility.
Yeah, on the flip side, you've got the developers who've now got to kind of assess the partnership fit for these now 15 companies. But if you're one of those big end users, you've got more potential suppliers than ever for data center capacity. And then figuring out who of those are real.
That's right.
So there's a lot of evaluation going on.
That's right.
It's like speed dating. $1 million app idea is like a Bumble for data center providers and end users. Swipe right or swipe left. We did talk to a guy at Data Cloud. He said when he goes to meet with he's a data center developer. When he gets to meet potential customers, he brings physical printouts of everything that you would expect, everything that a data center developer would verbally tell a potential end user. He has the receipts, as it will.
Yeah, because his comment was like he feels like when he's meeting with the users that they are really trying to figure out who's real and who's not. And that's that's our space.
Bragawatts, fake data centers.
That's right. That's our space today. It's like what is real and what's not, what can be delivered and what won't be. And so that's one of the really important things is in evaluations, even like the planned power we track, like we know it will not all be delivered because it's just going to be impossible for people to pull it off. So
that's good, man. All right. Any other thoughts on this? What's driving the biggest demand? These are your great thoughts.
No, I think
something we're going to continue to keep an eye on.
I mean, I think the one thing everyone should be thinking about is in 3 years, what are the new groups?
Yeah.
I mean, like
who's next?
What are the new groups that will be? How is this space going to shift to produce, new kind of segments of these companies that will be, taking space and power in different ways, and that's why our business is so fun. Like I said, I've been doing this now for 20 years, and we've just had these different eras in our space, and this one has by far been, the most impactful and the most interesting to watch.
100%. I've been in the space for 6 whole years.
Yep,
almost 7.
That's a long time, bro.
And I would also say
you didn't have gray hair when you started.
I would also say this is the most interesting era. So we're aligned in that regard.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to end the podcast with a trivia question, David. This is a callback to a prior podcast.
I love it.
I made a joke that you could power a data center with a CrossFit gym. Okay. And at CrossFit gym, you have these bikes, and you ride them, and they will tell you what your wattage output is.
Yes.
And that's one of the metrics that people will use to kind of assess their fitness. Yes. Okay, so how many David Liggetts, because I know what your power rating is because we've been doing this for a while.
A lot.
How many David Liggetts would it take to power a 10 megawatt data center?
Well,
This is assuming you could ride a bike for 24 hours straight.
Oh my!
Around the
there's
clock.
There's a lot of math involved here.
There's a lot of assumptions there,
Okay,
but that's
I don't know.
one.
What
I'm
is
not
it?
trying to do like
How
shift
many?
or anything.
How many?
36,000. 36,000 David Liggetts would take to power a 10
Okay,
megawatt data center.
well,
So I'm gonna maybe backtrack that.
Bad business model for us because there's only one
as a potential alternative energy solution. But
Yes. I love
hey,
it.
someone's got to do that work. I'm happy to have done it for the
That's right.
listeners. You can scratch that one off your list of alternative energy
Yes,
solutions.
yeah.
So.
Trust me, you don't want to see that. You don't want to see one David Liggett try to
I
power
would
down
love
a
to see,
center,
I
let
would love
alone
to see 36,000 David Liggetts.
Yes, terrible.
You get tired.
Yes.
The data center's like, no, we're running out of power.
Nope.
No, I'm just kidding.
We're done.
Yeah, we are done.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So thank you for listening. This has been fun. New podcast studio.
feels
Looking
right.
forward to doing
Feels
many
right.
more here.
Right on.
But again, datacenterHawk.com for more information. There's a ton of information out there. There's blogs we've written, content about data center market supply demand,
And a website you can subscribe to.
And a website you can subscribe to. All right. So check it out. We'll see you next time.